Hello. Yes, it's me. I've stepped out from behind my red box. Yes. Well, I'm laughing, but the reason that I've stepped out is that the subject I need to discuss, or I'm going to discuss today, is a bit sensitive, and I didn't feel that I could do it justice in a series of small pictures as I have been doing in my previous videos, because the subject I want to delve into is when you first think that you're seeing signs that someone you love and care about may be losing their way a bit and sliding very slowly into dementia. I am a bit of an expert on this, only not in a professional category obviously, but only because my parents both lived with me. My father had vascular dementia, and that was one of the reasons that we moved them into our property, because whilst my mother, who was 5 years older than him, had mobility issues, mentally she was good, but the time had come because my father had no short-term memory. And for those of you living with someone with no short-term memory, you know how frustrating that can be, and as frustrating for the person who is not remembering anything as it is for you. So something happened, which is why I'm making this little video, that made me start questioning whether in fact my mother was also going into dementia. You'd think I would recognise the signs, wouldn't you? Because, you know, I had lived with Dad with his developing dementia for a while, and then when we moved them around here, we actually lived in the same house with him, and we were the ones who he would come to in the garden and say, "Oh dear, I don't know, my windscreen's all misted up in my car and I can't work out how to demist it." Or, "My car's making a funny noise, it keeps beeping at me and I can't find out why." Obviously, the first one was fairly easy because I could show him how to demist his windscreen, but having to do that was unusual because my father had been a driver since he was 16 when he first got his first motorbike, and very soon after that he became a car driver. He had driven literally all around the world, near enough, apart from Asia and Alaska, but he had visited so many countries, he insisted on driving everywhere he went, and suddenly find he doesn't know how to demist his windscreen wasn't unusual, because by that time we knew that he had lost most of his short-term memory. But the car making the funny noise was actually he left his sunroof open and the car was telling him that. He did know that at one time, but he'd forgotten it. And it had got to the stage where actually him driving was a real problem, and getting him to stop was a big, big problem. And I did seek the help then of professionals who actually weren't any help, who told me they couldn't tell him to stop driving. I'd sort of almost have to wait till there was a crisis and somebody else took the keys away, or I was going to have to take the keys away, which I found very intimidating to have to do that to him. But anyway, that's veering off the subject a bit. I'm just giving you a bit of background there as to when this incident happened with my mother. You would have thought I'd recognise the signs, but it was a bit different. So here's what happened. She was having a very busy day that day. She was going to go and serve meals to the British Legion annual over 70s dinner. She was going to be one of the people serving. I don't know why, because she was in her mid-80s and she wasn't going to sit down and be served. She was in the background there doing the catering bit of it and the delivering of it. But that was her. She loved that. She was always involved in things, and she was very used to mass catering too, because I'm one of 6 children and the 14 grandchildren, and the house was always busy, and mass catering was what she did really well. I've tried. I'm no good at it, but she was. But this particular day, it was a cold day, and I was helping her put her coat on, a heavy winter coat, which she didn't wear that often because most places she went to in the car, it was just a short journey, and they wouldn't be going out in the cold much. But this particular day, she was going to walk round to the Legion. As I was lifting the coat to put her for her to put her arms in it, it felt quite heavy on one side. So I thought, oh, something in the pocket. So I just put my hand in the pocket. Oh, what's this? It was a squidgy mess in the pocket, all cold. So I slowly pulled it out, and I'm looking at it and thinking, what is this? What? Slightly mouldy. I'm sure it's cold chips, and they're sitting in this coat pocket. So mystified, I said, Mum, look what I've just pulled out of your pocket. It looks like cold chips. She, without a glance, said, oh yeah, it is, it's chips. End of, really. No explanation, no puzzling as to why the chips were in there on her part. Obviously on my part they were, but not on her part. It was just quite plain, yes, of course, they're chips. It's normal, isn't it, to have cold chips, mouldy cold chips in your coat pocket? You would have thought so from her expression. So I'm thinking, no, I don't like this. Something wrong here. Off she went. She had a lovely day. I didn't, because I spent most of the time pondering this after she went. It was like, why didn't she need an explanation of it? Why wasn't she puzzled? Why was it so black and white? Yes, they're cold chips. So I started thinking back to when she'd last worn that coat, and I realised it was about 3 or 4 weeks previous, maybe even more. And I had my older sister, who had passed away. She had been ill for some years with breast cancer, and she had died just before her 60th birthday. So there was a funeral to attend of their daughter and my sister. We live in the East Midlands, and she lived up near Chester. So quite a long journey, especially if you've got elderly people with you who need bathroom stops quite a lot, and to stretch their legs so they don't get too stiff. So on the journey, we'd had a few of these little mini stops, and then we found one with a nice country pub, and we stopped for a lunch, which was very nice. Then we got on, we got to our destination. We had a really nice evening, in a sad way, but you know, we met other relatives. We went to the funeral the next day, and then we drove all the way home. And I'm thinking, these chips, looking back over the meals we'd had while we were away, which were mostly buffet fingertip meals, no chips. The only chips we'd had been in that country pub on the journey to the funeral. So they'd been in her pocket all the way through the rest of that journey, all the day of the funeral, and all the way home again. So I'm thinking, why doesn't she query that? You know, why is she not even puzzled about them? She's just accepted that they're there. It's not usual, is it, to keep cold chips in your pocket for several weeks? Well, no, it's not. I've come to that conclusion. It's not the chips here that are the story, really. It is the mystery of why it was no mystery to her. You know, I'd gone through all the things. Was she keeping them to feed the birds? Did she think she'd get hungry later? Well, you know, the number of explanations for them being in her pocket all that time, or even during that day, weren't very many, so I'd ruled them all out. But in the middle of all the emotion that had been going on throughout this funeral, there these chips were quietly travelling hundreds of miles in her coat pocket. So when, as I said, when Dad's dementia first manifested itself, it was very much in loss of his short-term memory. I mean, I could do episode after episode of where had he parked the car. He even reported the car stolen more than once because he'd forgotten where he parked it. He was forgetting what things were for a lot of the time, who had visited, if anybody had visited, and sometimes they would have had a lovely day and he'd have no memory of it whatsoever. Oh, I haven't seen them for ages. So, yeah. But this was different, and once I'd been alerted to it through the chips episode, I was paying more attention and realised that there were several things that seemed perfectly normal to her, and sometimes to me initially, and then when you look deeper into it, you thought, no, this isn't normal. And it's not a misunderstanding, it's a pattern of misunderstanding about things and not needing explanations about things, accepting things. And it did get her into trouble financially, because at that time there wasn't the internet and all the scams came through your post box and send us a check because you've won suitcases for a cruise, and she's writing off and sending checks and not questioning or reading properly the information. And she wasn't a daft person. In her normal brain, she would have understood that. So, yeah, look for the signs, I suppose that's what I'm saying. Don't just take things at face value. Those people, you will know if you're already living with this, that living with people and living with two people in time, because they eventually dementia was full blown in her too. Living with two people with dementia can be at times bewildering, very, very frustrating, side-splittingly funny. I mean, just to think of some things now in my brain is starting me giggling, and full of moments that make absolutely no sense. And that can all happen within half an hour sometimes. So that's what you're living with. But despite my laughter, it's a cruel thing, dementia. Especially when you've lost somebody like we lost my sister, because Dad never remembered that she died. So if her name ever came up, he'd suddenly say, well, she hasn't been for ages. Mind you, he said that about everybody. But if you told him that, Dad, you don't remember, but she died, he had the grief all over again, the crying, oh no. And so in the end, you just stop saying those sort of things. You just say, well, she's busy, Dad, you know, she'll come when she can. And he's happy with that. So yeah, it's a short, small story, but I bet those people who are living with a loved one and you're just beginning to feel that they're slipping out of this world a little bit, you will have your own stories to tell, no doubt. It's time we did something about this awful disease, isn't it? Yeah. So if you're living through these periods and you're trying to make the most of the small windows that allow you at times to have a real connection with people, I know you're probably doing what we did. You look for the humour in everything, because if you can't find the humour in it, all that's left really is despair, and we don't want to live in despair, do we? So you cling to the funny times, to the humour, and that eventually is it's what took us through, and hopefully it's what's taking you through too. I have got several more funny stories, which I will tell as well, because we do need a little bit of light entertainment sometimes. So there will be future episodes where I will tell the lighter side of it. So in the meantime, if you've stayed with me, as in all my other videos, I hope you've stayed to the end and found it interesting, if not enjoyable. And so until the next time, happy rambling.